Morning. It's been a few days since the last video, and been lots going on in the world, like lots of elections in the UK and France and stuff like that. And so, as I'm always going on about, like, one of the reasons that I've made this channel is to like spread the ideas of like self-ownership and, you know, anarchism and things like that. And so the thing that I always get when I talk to people about, you know, anarchism, etc., what eventually always comes up is democracy. And it seems like people's concept of democracy or what democracy means to them in the mind isn't actually the democracy that you see in practice. So I kind of get it, you know, if you think on like the in the most superficial way, it's like, well, democracy is just everybody getting to say what they want, and then the majority wins. And that sounds kind of, you know, you think, well, yeah, you know, what could be wrong with that? I mean, I'm saying on the very simplistic level. So I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not against democracy because of the mechanism of it. The point is, I don't believe that people, you know, there's certain things that are just not negotiable, and you can't delegate rights that you don't have. But anyway, right now, I don't want to digress into that. Maybe that's a topic for another day. But like democracy as it stands, so if you look at something like, you know, democracy, there's lots of different ways of implementing it. So for instance, in the UK right now, there's a system that's called first past the post. So what it means is, everywhere, like, you divide, you know, the country gets divided geographically, and then within each of those little, like, geographic regions, you get one MP, one member of parliament. And so in the constituency gets to vote, and whoever gets the most votes wins. So even if he gets just one more vote, he wins. And you know, so just imagine it like there being 3 candidates, and like one gets 34% of the vote, one gets 33, and the other one gets 32. So the one with 34% of the vote wins, even though he's the minority. Well, he's one of the minorities because they're all minorities, but he gets, it's as if everyone voted for him. So that's just the way it works. So what does that result in? Well, basically, you've got a situation right now in the UK where one party, the Labour Party, has got a massive, you know, massively overrepresented. A lot of the others have got like 400 and some seats. But you've only got like 30-something% of the vote. So they've got like 2/3 of the seats or something with only 1/3 of the vote. And so, no matter, like, you know, whatever your philosophy, your political philosophy is, I think anyone would be hard pushed to say that that's actually fair. You know, it's fair within the rules that were established before the vote was taken, right? So, you know, no one can actually complain. But you've got parties who, you know, have got, you know, if it was proportional, then, like, so I think it's like Reform got like 4 seats. Whereas they should if it was proportional, they should have had more, like it should be like the 3rd most represented or something like that. But then So what are the alternatives to that? Well, an alternative system is like what happens in Spain and probably other parts. It's like you just have an electoral list, and then all the votes go in, and like more or less, it's not exactly like this, but more or less, the number of votes that you get kind of determines the number of seats that you get. And so what tends to happen, because believe it or not, like when you've got these parties, like even there aren't that many political parties that are actually radically different. Most of them have the same core principles, which is basically, that's what the state is. I mean, the reason that it's called an establishment is for a reason. You've got like the power of the state doesn't really change no matter what party gets in power. And the thing is also, it's like, although we're like told that you've got left wing or right wing, and these parties don't really, they all agree on the fundamentals. So we're talking about should you be taxed 20% or 18%? And it's like, oh well, if you want 20%, then that's because they're left wing, and the 18% is because they're more conservative. But it's like, you do realise that taxation is theft, right? It's basically, they're all of it on the authoritarian spectrum, they're all the same. And it's just, it is pretty much just, how do you want to rearrange the deck chairs? It's rearranging the furniture, it's not actually changing any of the fundamental policies. So these are different ways of, why do people believe in democracy anyway? It's got to be down to some kind of sense of fairness. Surely that's the way it's sold, but it's not even fair. So as we're saying, in the Spanish interpretation of it, you've got lists, and it's all proportional, etc., etc. So then what happens? So then you get your political factions who have to govern together usually. That's just the way it works. So I've heard this I've seen this on podcasts where somehow this is seen as a bad thing. In the UK, they think that's a terrible idea, that parties should have to try and get along with each other. But anyway, the point is, these parties will get together, and then what will just happen is you'll have a party who's a minority that eventually gets to lead the government. So you've still got this kind of, most people didn't vote for that. So it's not like it's actually fair. In terms of fairness, if you determine fairness by, how many people want a certain outcome, then the fairest type of democracy is the lynch mob, because then you've got a whole group of people, and there's only one person that doesn't want to be lynched out of all the other people. So that's the fairest way. So obviously, I don't know if I have to say this, but it is 2024, and so I don't think that lynch mobs are a good thing. But you've got to understand that in terms of democracy, it is the most democratic thing. But even the people who purportedly invented democracy, the Greeks, not everyone could vote. It was it was understood at that time, they understood that you can't just let just anyone vote, because what's the criteria for them knowing what to vote on? And it's, I think, it's kind of true that when people vote, it's not, they don't actually know what they're voting on. They don't know what the policies are. It's just total, football and tribalism type of thing. So, is that fair? I mean, is it even fair that, well, it's not fair, that's basically the point. It's what I'm getting at. It's like, it's kind of accepted that somehow that like democracy is a great thing, but it's just fundamentally unfair, because there are certain things that you shouldn't, they're just rights, they're your rights, and whether you want to call them God-given rights or, just basic human rights, but the point is, they're not conveyed on you. I believe that human beings have rights just for the fact that they are human beings. And it doesn't matter where you're from, and it doesn't matter where you live. I mean, obviously, in terms of states, it absolutely depends on where you're from and where you live, etc., etc. But another thing about rights, which people don't seem to get, is if someone else has to do something, like perform work or something, to convey you that right, then it's not a right. You don't have that right. So, although it's nice to say, we all have a right to healthcare, or we all have a right to housing, or, we all have a right to food. It's like, so how does that work? So your right to healthcare. Imagine if nobody wants to be a doctor. Or imagine if the doctor just doesn't want to treat you for whatever reason. Should violence be done to that person so that they treat you? Because that's basically what you're saying. That's what it all comes down to. And people don't want to, I don't know if they don't want to accept it, because I don't think it's actually disputable that, the only reason that people do the things that government tells them to do is because if they don't, there's like a pretty, there's very, very unpleasant consequences associated with not doing what the government tells you. So it's not like there's actual any voluntary interaction with the government, just because, if someone says, if someone points a gun at you and says, dig yourself a grave, and you do it, it's not like you've consented to digging yourself a grave, is it? And that is like 100% of the reaction, of the interactions that we have with government. And so, when we're talking about democracy, it's not, it's like, well, what are you actually choosing? Because, there's just some kind of pretense of you, like, electing your slave master or something. And there's actually a film about this, The Jones Plantation, which is very good. It was written by Larkin Rose. And it just spells it out. I definitely recommend watching it, because it's funny, it's a good film. And but it just blatantly points out the way democracy works, and why it's done, in fact. I can believe at some naive level, children can easily believe in democracy because it just seems fair. But also, it's like, if you're voting for something like, what flavour of ice cream can we have? Then, the consequences of, it's not like anyone's going to, well, imagine this at school. Imagine if there was like a vote, right, we're all going to have ice cream today. And there's vanilla ice cream and there's peanut ice cream. and there's 2 kids in the class who can't eat peanuts. So what happens if the class, so not only what happens if the class votes for peanut ice cream, but you've got to eat it. And say, well, you know, I'm allergic to it. It's like, no, we voted, it's fair, you've got to eat it. And so what happens then? You know, and that's kind of the situation that we're in now. I mean, that's just what democracy is. It's like, you've got to do it no matter what. You know, we voted on this and this is the result. It's like, well, hold on. What happens if there's like 12 kids in the class and, you know, 5 votes for peanuts? The 3 who can't eat don't want the ice cream, they don't vote. They say, look, there's nothing to vote for, I can't eat. Imagine like they can't eat either of them. Then, you know, there's no concept in democracy of like, you can't make me do this. No, it's like, why are we all in this kind of situation where it's like, if you don't vote then you can't complain. They say that, I get that all the time. It's like, hold on, what if I don't want to play? Where's the mechanism? Where's the consent of the government? No, does that not happen anymore? And it's like, no, it doesn't actually. Because if you can't even consent to opt out, then, you know, there is no consent of the government. It's the same type of consent that you're given to like being forced to dig your own grave. So, you know, it's just false. You know, it's based on the wrong idea. So look at the situation in France that just happened the other day. So they're like election system, like they have 2 rounds. I mean, so the first round is if anyone wins, gets more than 50% of the vote, then that's it, they've won. If that isn't the case, then anyone who gets, anyone who gets over 12% or something the first round is allowed to vote. Something like that. And then, but you're also allowed, like, what happens is like certain candidates will withdraw, and that way they get en masse, like the public kind of like votes against who they least like, type of thing. So that's what's happened in the first round. I think it was Marie Le Pen's party, like, got loads of votes. They were the biggest minority. But then in the second round, they came 3rd. But apparently not in votes. There's a certain thing there as well where it's divided into constituencies as well, apparently. So like, although they came 3rd in seats, but like, I think it was 2nd in number of votes or something. But the point is, even then, like, the amount of people voting and like what actually happens doesn't even tally. So I think there's a confusion, or like when people talk about the fairness of democracy, what they're actually talking about is, we establish some rules, and if those rules get followed, then it's fair. No one actually talks about, hold on, are those rules fair? You know, what does this imply? Because you know, if people actually, I mean, people don't even care, let's face it. I'm sort of like arguing about something that nobody cares about, I guess. Because the point is, if people actually cared about self-ownership, then there couldn't be any democracy, because it would be a nonsense. Because why would I try to enforce something on you because I don't care? And that's, I mean, I literally don't. I don't want to force people to live the way I think you should live. And that's kind of, that's just the crux of it. Whereas I think most people do want to force people to live how they want to live. I think that's just the problem. And so what I'm trying to get out, I don't know whether it's effective me saying that, you know, explaining why democracy isn't fair, because people don't care. And I think it's not until people actually fundamentally realise that there's no such thing as authority, which is where, you know, that's Larkin Rose's book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. I mean, that's just what it's about, and it just explains, you know, why authority doesn't exist. And it's you know, and that book is just what fundamentally changed my life, because although I didn't want to live my life that way when I read the book, but after I read it, I couldn't trick myself into actually believing that authority does exist. So when it talks about authority, it's not talking about, like, say, like an authority in terms of competency. You know, it's not, you know, sort of like where you say, like, such and such a surgeon is an authority on, you know, brain surgery or whatever, you know, that's different. What it's talking about is, you have to do something because I say so. And it's like, well, what's that based on? It's like, well, you know, I've got a badge that says this, or, you know, I've got a title that says that. And these things are just completely made up. You know, it's not, the first time I heard this, I thought it was just someone being stupid. You know, like where they say that, you know, if somebody dresses up in a certain way, then they magically have certain rights that other people don't have. And obviously it's talking about, like, police and things like that. And I thought to myself, yeah, but, like, they're police. It's like, but, you know, what does that mean? Why? What does it mean? So, like, somehow the concept is that everyone gets together and agrees that, like, the police have certain rights that other people don't have. I think that's, like, the idea of it. And so, you know, what do we mean by that? Well, I mean, we mean that they can, you know, I can't just go up and stop someone from doing something that I don't want them to do. I'm not allowed to do that, but police are. And it's like, well, where does that authority come from? It's like, well, it comes from the people. It's like, right, okay. But if I'm not allowed to stop someone doing something, and everyone else isn't allowed to do that, how can we all get together and just say, oh, now we are allowed? So that doesn't actually make sense. You know, it's just plucking something. You might as well just say, well, because God let me do it. You know, it's just plucked from that. And it doesn't, you know, so that's like the way it gets explained in Larkin Rose's book. It's like he says something like, so imagine if, you know, we employ some private security, and it's like I get a security guard for my house to protect my house. And then my neighbour comes along and says, that's a really good idea. Can I pay, you know, can we, like, hire the same company together and, like, coordinate and, like, so that they protect both of our houses? And it's like, yeah, great. And then, like, imagine if the whole street does this. It's like, oh yeah. And then, so, you know, because, like, well, the whole street except, like, you know, one does it, and then we say to this guy, all right, you're the only one in the street who's not signed up to this, right? So now you're going to have to pay for it as well, because, you know, it's just better. It's better for the whole street if we all do this, and so you just got to pay for it. And, like, you know, that's absurd. You know, that's not the way it works. You can't. No one would expect that to happen. But that is exactly what we do with the police. You know, that's exactly how the state works. It's just like, well, you know, you're all here, so you've all got to pay for this. And you just have, because the rest of us say so. So even if you know, if you want to argue like practicality or whatever, fair enough. But no one can actually truly argue that it's fairness, democracy. You know what I mean? Is it democratic? Yeah, I suppose, but it's not fair. And what are you doing? You're taking away someone's right. And so, so I mean, the way I see the problem basically is the whole of society as it stands is based on a fundamental flaw, which is the majority can overpower the minority. It's like that's just allowed, and that's really bad. That's what that's a gang rape. Like all the guys want one thing and the girl doesn't want it, but it's democracy. And it's like that's just when it's put like that. Surely nobody would say that a gang rape is good, even if it is democratic. And it's like, well, she didn't even vote for it. It's like, well, she was there. And it's like, well, that's just terrible. How can you say that? It's like, yeah, but it's the same thing. I don't want to vote, but I'm here. And so all these things apply to me. And it's, it's literally just semantics, of like saying the whole thing of, tax. It's just a euphemism. And I understand people not wanting, don't like it. I mean, what I see, what always happens, like when I talk to people. I mean, I don't bang on to people about this, but occasionally it comes up in conversation. Usually at election time, on who are you voting for? And I go, I don't vote. And then it's like, oh, everyone piles on me then. But like, the point is, what tends to happen, rather than when I bring up the fact that it's immoral, I don't get nobody tries to argue why it isn't immoral. It's always, well, what else could we do? And that's just changing the question. That's not, the whole reason that I don't vote is because of the immorality of it, not because of the practicality of it. I mean, I don't eat meat because I think it's immoral. So I eat fish instead, which you might say, yeah, well, that's immoral. But in the chain of like species, I think that fish should be little cows type of thing. And also, I'm not saying that's a good way of like killing an animal where like you suffocate it to death, pulling it out of the water. But like the industrial process of killing, millions of animals the way we do it is just horrific. And that's why I don't eat meat. No, I don't go around making anyone else not eat meat. In fact, I very rarely even talk about it. But the point is, it's like, that's my choice. And I don't push it on anyone else. But nobody would like, if anyone made me eat meat, then everyone would just obviously think that wasn't right. But the fact that I don't vote is somehow like this horrendous, how could you not vote? And everyone says this, you're just giving your vote to like whatever party they don't like. Whatever party they don't want to vote, they least like, they always say that, accuse me of giving my vote to them because I don't vote. And it's just ridiculous. So, I mean, it just is a matter of principles for me, of why I don't vote. And I know that it's not like it's ever going to get to a situation where I don't think you can be convinced. I don't do this to convince people directly. It's just planting the seeds, because I think once people see that, it's a principled way with actual principles, like, the thing that's like at the beginning of your thought processes. If you don't believe in freedom, then what I can't even get my head around how people must think. And I think that's why the world's we've gotten these knots and the way people vote, and that's why people vote against things, because you can't vote for something when you know that that thing is like, you know, robbing you and taking your rights away and stuff. You can only vote against. Oh well, they'd rob me more, or like they take the money that they stole from me and use it on these things, and I'd rather that they steal from me and use it on other things. Nobody thinks like that. But if they did, they just go, hold on, these people are stealing from me. Why can't I decide what I want to give me money to? But so like I say, I don't do this to convince anyone, but I want to plant seeds because I do think it worked. It happened to me. You know, I was a total statist, and in fact, you know, it's almost when you get to a certain age, you're already a statist because you've just been indoctrinated with it. It's just you just get told this is the way the world works, and although it is the way the world works now, it's not the way it has to work. And I actually do believe. I know it's like people groan, but I do believe that if voting did change anything, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. You know, I fundamentally believe that. Anyway, it looks like my lunch is ready. I don't know if you've been hearing banging noises and stuff. There's been work going on in the road. That's what those noises are. Thanks for watching to the end. You know, thanks for getting through these videos. I hope people find it at least slightly interesting. Well, please leave a like if you do. And I've cooked lunch. See you around.